Good evening, and welcome to this very special edition of the Ecoustics podcast. I'm your host, Ian White, Ecoustics Editor-in-Chief. We are coming to you live this evening for the very first time on YouTube, which is very exciting for all of us here at the magazine. And also tonight, we're coming to you live from 7 different cities across North America, which is definitely a technical wonder, and kudos to Mitch Anderson for getting that organized. You can find the Ecoustics podcast on our website, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and obviously here on YouTube as well. Without further ado, because we have so many guests tonight joining us on the video podcast, I'm going to start out in the West Coast, which is our sort of normal way of doing things. Joining us this evening from Santa Ana, California, is Ecoustics founder and publisher, Brian Mitchell. Good evening, Brian.
Hi, Ian. Hi, everybody. Wow, this is going to be an amazing time. So excited to see everybody online and visible. So looking forward to a great show.
Also joining us this evening from Sin City, Nevada, that would be Las Vegas for those of you who are not up on your lexicons, is the new host of the Ecoustics video series, which premieres this Thursday. She's known as That Hi-Fi Girl on Instagram. She is an accomplished musician, and she's also, as of recently, an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Good evening, Emiko.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Ian.
Now, also joining us, Emiko, from slightly north of you in chilly Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where the Calgary Flames have finally figured out how to play hockey again, is Ecoustics contributing editor and our birthday boy, Eric Pye.
Woo, thank you, Ian. It's so great to be here. We've been talking about doing this live show forever. I'm glad it's finally happening.
Absolutely. And also joining us tonight from behind the glass, where he sits on every single Ecoustics podcast, but also his own FM radio show, Black Circle Radio, which you can listen to every Monday night. The man with the plan from Muskegon, Mitchapalooza Anderson. Good evening, Mitch.
Hey, thank you, Ian. I'm just ready for a scintillating discussion.
Indeed. Also joining us this evening, we're going to go a lot further south right now, from the Lone Star State, Ecoustics music editor and the host of a new podcast, Crossroads Radio. Lauren, we don't need no trash cans in Houston, Halliday. Good evening, Lauren.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, last week was a bit of a bummer, but happy for the Braves. So glad that we're all finally here together. Got the gang all together live. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And finally, joining us from Buffalo, New York, Ecoustics contributing editor, aka the budget audiophiler on Instagram, Jeremy. I'm not going to miss that Eichel guy, Sikora. Good evening, Jeremy.
Good evening, guys. Very happy to be here. And yeah, we're not going to miss Eichel at all.
Hockey fans around North America will understand that. And once again, I'm Ecoustics editor-in-chief Ian White, joining you this evening from breezy Asbury Park, New Jersey. Our topic tonight is actually an interesting one, and it was one that was suggested. It's always good not to lose your laptop. Our topic tonight is actually one suggested by Mitch Anderson, and it's entitled Hearing What Is in Our Heads. And the question that I'm going to pose to the entire panel tonight, and this is really, I guess, asking this bigger question, what each of us are really searching for, sonically, when we listen to hi-fi, or when a new piece of audio equipment was added to our system, what exactly were we listening for? But more importantly, was there an album or live music event or a life experience, quite frankly, that dramatically changed the way that you hear and view things? And what was that moment that, and to quote Mitch, oh shit, I'm hearing it. What did that feel like? And what changes did that make to your life and, how you listen to music at this point? And I'm going to start actually with you, Brian, out on the West Coast.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, thank you. This is a little bit of a surprise to go first, but I'll take the honor. But yeah, I think when it comes to hi-fi and high fidelity sound, I'm looking for the recreation of the live experience, like what I'm hearing when I'm at a live event, whether it's an amplified event or whether it's an acoustic performance, I'm looking to recreate that experience in my living room. And the system that can do that most accurately is the one that I'm on the hunt to endlessly find. And it seems to be an endless journey on that path. So now I'd like to hear Mitch, because he brought up this topic, and I want to know, Mr. Vinyl.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Mr. Vinyl.
Oh, brother.
What are you?
Oh, brother. Yeah, this question is one I talk about on Black Circle Radio quite a bit. Just in the way of every day and every week or instance has a different emotional resonance. There are different frequencies happening all around us, from a fall wind, to enjoying a summer wave. Those are all completely different vibrations and resonate with the human spirit very differently. And so when I'm searching, I'm always trying to find what my experience is in those moments in my head. And through the record, and sometimes it's through a master bus compressor, and sometimes it's not. And it's finding, for me, how do I recreate a moment that is taken a part of me, I've been a part of in that space. How do I bring that into my studio, and how do I find what that moment was? With components, with different musical expression, or archive. Is it through the reel-to-reel, or is it through the SP15s today? And so just making sure that I am conscious and aware, and then also practicing how to find those emotions is really important to me. And it also kind of keeps me on my game too, by just pushing myself in that manner. So really that's where it kind of is for me. So yeah, thanks for choosing this topic. There was no pushback on it from the group, by the way. So thank you. I was excited about that. You all look wonderful, and I'm really happy to be a part of this. So thanks. Yeah. Ian, giving it back to you, man.
Okay, Emiko, I'm going to go to you next, but I just want to address, I guess, my thing just really quickly, because I want everyone else to have sort of an equal chance to speak. I think because of the fact that I have been, I guess, writing about hi-fi the longest in the group, I'm probably the most jaded. And, I've had a chance over the years to listen to so many components and so many different scenarios, both in people's homes, trade shows, my own home, stores, dealers, factories. For me, after all these years, if a system or a component does not almost move me to the point of tears, or some form of real intense emotional connection to the music in some capacity, I have no interest listening to it, and I certainly wouldn't buy it. And I think I had that experience when I was really young as an audiophile. When I was 17, I went to a hi-fi store in Toronto, and I listened to a system that there's no way I could afford it. But it was so emotionally sort of moving. Every aspect of it sort of connected with me. I almost sat up in my chair and began crying after listening to the first couple of songs, that I realized that I definitely did not fall into the accuracy camp. I was much more of a sort of as opposed to, I wouldn't say I guess cerebral is probably the wrong word, but more of an emotional listener. And that's why I've definitely gravitated more towards certain types of speakers and amplifiers over the years. Emiko, as a musician, as someone who's a professional musician who does film scores and television scores, I'm curious to know your perspective on this.
Thanks, Ian. First of all, Mitch, this is a great topic. I'm so glad that you suggested it.
Hey, thanks.
Because it's something that I think not enough people in the audio community, and certainly not in the industry, talk about. And so this is a wonderful chance for us to bring it to light and really make a go of it. But so, Ian, to your point, I might be the most jaded person, not to get into a contest with you, but seeing as I've been in studios my whole life making the music that people listen to, it's difficult for me actually to sit down and hear a hi-fi or high-end system that really speaks to me, because coming from the place where the music is made, I already know how it's supposed to, I was there when it happened. So, and Brian and I talk about this a lot, right? That the idea of what is it that you're trying to reproduce and why. So I think, I certainly am not looking for live reproduction. I went to see the Rolling Stones last night at Allegiant Stadium and they were phenomenal. But let me tell you something, my friends, I do not want to bring that sound home with me. That was holy moly. No thanks, I'm good. But that being said, I feel like there's two things that I look for. One is if a system or component as a whole can spark out something very special in the music, meaning when I listen to a song on a system, or if I'm testing out speakers or amps or whatever it may be, if there's something special that jumps out at me, that's it. That's that, oh shit, it's here moment, right? And I think in a lot of ways, I'm gonna bring in a human side of this, which is in a lot of ways, that's like meeting, I won't go so far as like dating, but I'll say it's like meeting new people, right? If you can converse with an individual back and forth and you're vibing and you've got that rhythm and that back and forth, and you know that you're feeling good about where the conversation is going, then it's worth continuing that conversation. And then there are times when you're just meeting somebody and they're talking at you and you're going, wow, I gotta go. This is horrible. I can't get this time back in my life. I'm good, right? And so, but that's the same aspect that I look for in a system, is the idea that if that system, if there's a reciprocity, if that vibe and that groove is coming at me, and I always tell people, they say, well, how do you know when the mix is done? How do you know if it's a good system? I said, it has to pass the neck test. And everybody goes, what's the neck test? And I go, that. If I can't do this, if I don't find myself doing this just automatically, then try again.
Try again.
Try again.
Jeremy?
So this was an interesting question, and I actually gave it probably more thought than I needed to. But when I heard stereo headphones on a Walkman in the early 80s, and for the first time that you hear kind of encompassing music, that's when I thought there was more to it. And that was well before I've ever been to a live show. So in hearing that and kind of chasing that encompassing music in your living room or your dining room or wherever you want to set it up, and then having the different, components kind of mix in to make different kinds of music, different kinds of sounds, different kinds. I do agree the live, I mean, with the exception of seeing a live show at a record store, acoustic, that was great. But if you're going to a stadium show, it's going to be a lot of echo and not a lot of stuff that you want to recreate. So hearing that, remembering that, and then recreating it with different formats. Could be cassette, reel to reel, could be CDs even, could be a mix of tubes, it could be a streamer with some 1950 music amps hidden in the background. So just trying different things, hearing it, different versions of the same song, different pressings, different. So the curiosity is just a lot of it, is hearing different interpretations of your favorite music.
Lauren?
I think for me, it's really been just about being able to hear and feel as much of the music as possible. And I guess as it is intended to be heard by the artist. I think for a very long time, I didn't realize how much I was missing before I had my first real system, which is, not anything fancy, but that was kind of my moment when I had my first turntable, my first set of good speakers. And it was the first time I was really listening to a system and not just something that was a convenient source, like a computer or the car or my iPod or whatever. And I heard so much more of the music for the first time. And for me, that was kind of the moment where I realized that there was a lot more that I could dig into and a lot more to be heard in the music that I already loved and enjoyed. And so it's been just sort of a progressive, I don't know, revealings to me of the music as I have upgraded, and I have different components now, and with those have revealed more and more things to me. So I think that's one of the kind of coolest experiences, is to listen to a song that you may have heard a bunch of times before, but then hear something that you never heard in any of your prior listens and realize that that's something that the system has evoked for you.
Okay, Eric?
I found the question really, really interesting too. And I kind of like thought back to as a kid where, I grew up in a household that played only classical music. And so I heard symphonies, I heard concertos, I heard choral music, I heard chamber music. And there was a bit of an imprinting that happened there, I think, in terms of the kinds of sounds that you get from that type of music and the kind of richness and lushness and complexity. And so I think that's always in the back of my mind. And I think in terms of systems, that a lot of it depends on your music preferences. Can it create the kind of music that you like to listen to? And I think that classical sound from my childhood is carried through. The music that I listened to as a teenager, I was still looking for those kinds of sounds, which is why groups like, Depeche Mode and Simple Minds, Steve Winwood, Pink Floyd, there was that complexity and lushness to it that I tried now. And that's what's in the back of my head when I'm thinking about audio equipment. Can that equipment reproduce the kind of music that I listen to? And so, you'll see and hear that people talk about Cerwin Vegas as being the ultimate rock speakers. I'm not going to buy a pair of Cerwin Vegas because I'm not a huge rock person. Like, I'm classical, I'm jazz. And so what I'm looking for is something that's going to really reproduce a really, really nice low end, that's going to have a really, really nice high end, but nothing too harsh, and then sweet through the middle. And that's basically what I'm looking for, something that's going to be able to handle, polyphony, multiple instruments, multiple voices all at the same time, and kind of allow you to hear those individual things, but bring them together. Ian, you talked about being an emotional listener. I'm not really a technical listener. I'm not really analytical. Does it make my heart sing? And is it giving me that full sound?
Yeah, Eric, I'm definitely in the same camp as you. Part of Mitch's, question, the larger question was there a specific event, or song even, that really kind of, brought everything into focus for you? And I guess I'll go first on this one. There's a scene in the movie Philadelphia, and for those who haven't seen the Tom Hanks film Philadelphia, there's a really, really powerful scene where Tom Hanks is actually at home, and Denzel Washington is the attorney representing him in his case, and his character is dying of AIDS, and he's listening to the opera, and the speakers in the background are actually a pair of Martin Logan's CLS. And when Mitch and I were doing our podcast a number of months back with Gail Sanders from Martin Logan and Icon Audio, afterwards, I got I wasn't even on the air anymore. I got a little emotional, Mitch, actually thinking about the very first time I heard the Martin Logan CLS. And for those who don't know that particular speaker, they were sort of considered in the early 80s to be sort of like the state-of-the-art electrostatic speaker. They're still considered a reference today, almost 35 years later. And I remember just listening in the same way that Tom Hanks's character got very emotional listening to the music that moved him. I remember, listening to those particular speakers the first time as a teenager. And even though I was a heavy metal guy, I won't pretend in high school that I wasn't a metalhead, but I still listened to a lot of classical and jazz music. And listening to classical music on it was such an emotional experience. It was sort of like you couldn't believe that, that something could sound like that in your home. And and I'm curious if any of you sort of had along the your own journey, if you had one of those moments listening to anything. It could have been a song where you literally realized how much you loved the sound of music and how, you know, it struck a chord with you emotionally. Brian, you've been a little quiet, so I want to pull you back
Pull me
in.
back in on this one.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, strangely, I don't have that song that kind of jumps out at me. But I don't want to stop this topic from rolling on by coming up with something else to talk about. So I'd like to put it out to the floor for anyone else to pick this up. But I do want to follow up with Emiko's comment on amplified music and the concert thing. I wasn't referring to the thunderous concert sound. It's more of creating the hard to reproduce instruments like piano, trumpet, drums, and getting the feeling of those in your listening room, along with the voices to match. And that's the extremely hard part of every hi-fi system, because when it does that, then it creates that emotional experience that connects you to the music because you feel like you're there. So that's a little bit what I was hinting at, but I didn't quite eloquently say that. But yeah, I appreciate the correction, Emiko. But I don't want to stop that topic from going. But I think, Mitch, you always have something emotional to talk about. So I kind of want to get you going next.
That's a kind word for it. I think for me, based on songs, Ian, that you were saying specifically, that I've been thinking kind of trying to anyways about my life with music. My wife, Deborah, co-host Deborah, she actually said, like, what era of like BCR is your favorite? And that was such an odd question, that I didn't really see coming, and that kind of put myself forward to like just thinking about these different eras of myself through a musical journey. Was I playing more music at the time? Was I listening to more music at the time? What was being released at the time, and then what was being shown to me at certain times that was outside of my control? Like, I think a lot about, Eric, you're saying that you were brought up in a home with classical music. And when you said that, yeah, I thought about my house and my parents. They're listening, they're watching right now. Hi, Mom and Dad. They like to have on the Carpenters, Neil Diamond, Jim Croce, Foreigner. That was the first CD I ever bought. I also, though, think about those instances that are so like fleetingly impactful, when I'm like on a bus or something, and I can hear headphone bleed out of someone behind me, and I'm not choosing to hear those things, but they are impacting my moment, and they're making me aware of my surroundings differently. And the same goes for entering a guest's home that you've never been in. What's on, and how does that define that experience, which I find very a whole nother topic, really. But when it comes to like a song or a transformative moment, I would say it was when I was in college, and I worked at a local music shop, and there's a band called Beast in the Field, and they Jordan, the guitarist, Jamie, the drummer, they're no longer a duo, but all instrumental, two-piece stoner doom noise, but and shout out Jordan Archival for the intro, Acoustics podcast intro music. But I would go on the road with them and help lift cabs and run front of house and just kind of hang, right? And Jordan's rig, though, was most of the time it was 8 to 10 speakers, so 4 to 5 full stack amplifiers that were all vintage, mostly all over 100 watts, and so that's like Laney amplifiers, vintage Marshall Majors, Sun amplification, just like quintessential rock and roll amps, you know, the greats of the greats. And so when you're standing on stage, when he was anyways, that's 1,000 watts essentially of all tube power that is nothing but a guitar. And we were at a show in Lansing, and he let me play it like on stage, and I have never harnessed that much electrical power in my life. And there's a picture of me on I don't know, Instagram or something, but I look like a ghost, or like something had taken my entire body out of myself and just like left me to be on this stage. But to feel that, because sound is physical, you know, like that's why we feel the pounding of the bass, and at a really good electric show we're feeling it the next day. My neck hurt the next day, not from headbanging, but just from the sheer force of that tidal wave of sonic atrocity running across my shoulders. Like that was the moment for me. And I think that's why I'm so addicted to broadcasting, because you can't get much of a louder amplifier than a broadcast tower. And so, you know, that moment was like, holy cow, like music I'm all done. Like, there we go, on to the next one. Like, what's the next song? What's the next tour? What's the next record? So that moment for me in college was it. Thank you for asking and letting me relive that powerful tale. I'll find the picture and send it over to you guys so we can post it or something. But
please do.
Yeah, that was my moment.
Jeremy?
So my dad was a Beach Boys fan, and we heard the Beach Boys in our Buick Century station wagon, which I believe had maybe one functioning speaker, maybe two every once in a while. So when I heard the Beach Boys, I heard it as basically pop music, surf rock. When I heard the Beach Boys, specifically Good Vibrations, on a good system, quietly, and you hear the layers, you hear the strings, you hear, you know, what Brian Wilson and company did. It's an entirely different song. It's a completely different experience than pop music being blared out of a station wagon. It is deep, it is technical, it's layered. So it's a band that used to be pop music, and now it's genius level recording, genius level pressing, and that's kind of where I saw it transform from just music in the background or just music to, wow, so much work went into this, so many layers for just this seemingly poppy fun song.
Lauren?
I think my moment was what I mentioned earlier about getting my first system. That was also when I was getting into vinyl, and hearing that sound was really what propelled me to really getting into vinyl. But I don't know if I remember exactly the record or song, but I know one that I listened to a lot at that time, and one that I can remember really hearing differently was Radiohead's In Rainbows. And like Jeremy mentioned, hearing the layers, the production on that song, so much more of it. I could just feel it so much more and hear so much more of it. It's like, wow, I've been listening to that album for probably 5 years at that point, but it hadn't impacted me that way. I hadn't felt that kind of full emotion of it that you mentioned, Ian. So yeah, that was probably the moment for me.
Eric?
I think in terms of like pop songs, the first song that really grabbed me that was outside of the classical kind of milieu was Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush. And that song just blew me away. And that's, I think, one of the songs, that and Dancing Queen by ABBA. They both came out round about the same time. But I think, so I went through a long period of living in a very transient lifestyle. So I never really had a good system for years and years and years. And I think one of the more recent experiences that has really kind of informed where I am today in terms of the kinds of equipment I buy and the kind of music I buy is going to jazz coffee shops in Japan. And I've written about it on Acoustics. Those experiences, they just floored me. You've got these old locations that typically opened in the 50s and 60s. They've got old tube amps. They've got these big JBL speakers, old turntables, just all this really cool equipment. And the experience of being in these little spaces with incredible sound systems and incredible music, and you're having a beer or you're having a coffee and you're talking to this old guy who's in his 80s who opened the shop back in the 60s, and maybe he wants to retire, but nobody's taking them over. That's what I'm trying to recreate in my little shop of horrors back here. Is that kind of sound, that kind of vibe, that kind of history. And to tell you the truth, my wife and I talk about it often. When we retire, there's a good chance we're going to head back to Japan. She's Japanese. And there's a good chance that we're going to either buy or start a jazz coffee shop. Cool. And that'll how we'll live out our retirement days. And it's just so amazing. And anybody who hasn't experienced one of them, thankfully, these kinds of places are starting to open up in North America. But yeah, just amazing.
And we will all be your first customers in Japan.
I hope so.
I have a strange feeling about that.
Open invite.
I don't have a song per se. Finally, I wrote about this in a recent magazine article I did for one of Acoustics' publication partners. Growing up in studios, I actually ended up really hating listening to music. It was horrible for me. I couldn't listen for leisure because I was constantly in the studio, always recording, always mixing, always editing. So I had the love of listening sucked out of me, actually, especially when I was signed to a major label. And it was really difficult for me I couldn't go out to dinner. I couldn't go to bars. I wouldn't go anywhere with friends because they wanted to go to concerts or somewhere, oh, that's my jam, that's my song. And I'd go, no, I'm not down for it. And so it wasn't until I was 21. Now I'm telling the world how old I am. And I was releasing my first major international release, which just turned 20 on November 1st, as a matter of fact. And Scott Hall, awesome. The Grammy Award-winning mastering engineer, was mastering my record. And I asked my manager if we could have an attended session, because normally mastering guys, they like to work alone as a rule. And here comes this 20-year-old eager beaver. Hi, I'm going to sit in the back of your room and take notes as I go and ask questions and annoy you. And I went. He was very gracious. We're still in touch to this day. And he said, okay, but I just want to warn you, when you come into my room, it's going to be weird. And I didn't know what he meant. And he had his room is very sparse, and he had these 2 tower speakers behind the desk. And the desk was sort of a floating desk. And he said, there's only 2 pairs of these in the world. One is here that you're looking at, because they're custom built, and the other is built by the designer as the prototype, and that's it. Nobody else has these speakers. I said, what are they called? He goes, I don't know. They're Scott Hall speakers, whatever. And he said, okay, I'm going to close the door now. And I sort of went, all right, whatever. Why is this guy telling me this? He closed the door, and I heard this sound. And for 2 seconds, I was okay. And then my eyes started watering, and I started shaking, and I didn't know why. And he goes, oh yeah, we this is basically sensory deprivation. That's how I master. There's no airflow. There's no ambient sound. There's nothing in that room. It is, when I say the sound, I heard the sound of silence. I mean, I heard the sound of silence. It almost crushed my body. And then he put on, my manager was sitting next to me, and he put on the 3rd track of my record, and I almost died. I have never heard. And it wasn't oh, I love my own music. It was the level that he had elevated this to was intergalactic. It was unreal. I'll never forget. I turned to my manager and he had tears streaming down his face. And I said, "Are you crying because the door is shut or because you like the song?" And he goes, "I don't know." And that was the moment I walked out of that session and I went home and I grabbed the Sweetwater catalog, because as a 21-year-old, that's what you have access to at the time. And I'm thumbing through trying to find something. And I called my photographer, had a vintage system. He was all into vintage stuff. And they found me a pair of vintage tannoys. And that was my first like foray from pro audio into hi-fi. And that changed the way that I listen, because I was no longer listening as a skill or as a tool or a necessity. I was able to set that aside and just listen to be present. And that moment in Scott's mastering suite was life-changing for me. So
I like that story. It's
sorry, Scott, don't mean to embarrass you.
Emiko will appreciate this. So I would say my two musical life-changing moments would be, number one, sitting in Star Wars as a 7-year-old in 1977 in the Eglinton Theater in Toronto. Canadians watching will know the Eglinton Theater. And it was the first theater in North America, I think, to actually have THX. It was actually one of the test beds for it. So there I was, little Ian White, 7 years old, sitting in the Eglinton Theater, and Star Wars came on. And when the first few notes of the Star Wars theme by John Williams exploded, and it's a huge theater. So we're not talking like 100, 200 seats. This is like a place that could hold 800 people on a slow day. I felt the pressure in my lungs, and I kind of I didn't know if I was going to cry or scream. And the movie hadn't even been a scene yet. The Imperial Star Destroyer had not yet come into the scene chasing Tantive 5. And I was almost like in tears, because I could not believe that a movie soundtrack could do that. And that sort of started me on my journey in terms of being obsessed with movies, but also movie soundtracks, because it's by far the biggest part of my music collection. And then I would say the second experience I had that really kind of made me realize just how much I love music and how much it meant to me. I saw Jeff Healey play at a club in Toronto when I was, I guess, in my late teens, almost 20. And he'd already become somewhat of a star. So he'd already released See the Light, and he had been in Roadhouse. And I saw Jeff Healey play like an hour set in a grungy bar in Toronto. And I think everyone kind of walked out like almost like in stunned silence, because we had never ever heard anyone play the guitar like that. It was, for those who aren't Jeff Healey fans, go on YouTube and look up his performance of While My Guitar Gently Weeps that he did actually with Nathan East. If you're not like sort of in stunned silence and almost in tears after watching that, don't buy a hi-fi, because it's not gonna help you. Actually, Mitch, I think actually I'm curious to know from everyone in the group, because we kind of decided we were going to keep this sort of a non-hi-fi component show, but I'm just curious, like under 30 seconds each person, has there been a specific component that you listen to, even if it was only once in your life, a specific component that you listened to that you were so sort of like shaken by the experience that you were like almost afraid to ever own it, because the next experience could never be as good? So Mitch, I'm going to start with you on that one.
I'll never forget the main, the first set of hi-fi speakers that I personally owned was a just mint pair of Pioneer CS99As with the FS stamped woofers and no reconing needed. It was like, they were just absolutely perfect. And so those rocked me, but I don't really have like a set piece of like, wow, I don't want to hear anything again. But a piece of equipment, and can I answer it in a way of like a piece that has inspired me to continue?
There are no rules, man.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, I'm wicked privileged to have the system that I do here in Black Circle Studios, and like the Klipschorns from sometime in the 60s. But the most inspiring piece of equipment that I've ever experienced in my life is the linear tube audio MZ3, where it is the most crushingly it's just the most crushing, period, not crushingly. It's just the most crushing 1 watt, like, of all time. It has inspired so much from going to, like I said, like a broadcast tower, and how much wattage is, and gain staging and amplification happens within that system, to then when I come home to only have 1 watt powering those horns. It has like inspired me to pick up the Elements of Electronics book, and start digging into circuits and recapping crossovers, or fixing my own cables, or installing new parts. Actually, Jeremy, budget audiophile over there, you made a post a while ago. This was maybe, I don't know, a year ago or something, 8 months or whatever, where you just showed a picture of you were soldering or something like that. And I think you might have had one of your kids around you or something at the time when you were doing it. And that was right around the time that I got the MZ3. And so with the boys being little and everything, it was kind of like a perfect storm. And so that piece of equipment, that I would say the linear tube audio MZ3 was my piece, because I also do a ton of work on headphones as well. So that would be my like game changer, holy crap moment. So the possibilities are endless within this experience, kind of thing.
True. Very true. Eric?
So it's not so much a component, it's a pair of headphones. And it was the ZMF Omni, which is one of the early models that ZMF put out, Zach over there. It was the first planar magnetic headphone I ever heard. I had it playing out of an Audio GD NFB 15 DAC amp. And I was playing Brahms's, I don't remember if it was the 1st or 4th symphony, but it was mind-blowing because, planar magnetic headphones, they have this slam and this realism to them. And what I hadn't expected, people had told me about how realistic they would be. What I hadn't expected was how dark they would be. And out of the depths of absolute Hades came this amazing sound of an orchestra slowly coming in, and I was just gobsmacked. And for ages and ages, I knew I couldn't really afford a pair of ZMFs, and then one of my Instagram friends had a pair that she was selling on the cheap, and I snapped them up like no tomorrow, and they are absolutely still my favorite headphones.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm a little bit spoiled in this camp because I've been to a lot of audio shows over the year. So I've heard a lot of really expensive systems, and I'm afraid to name one, but I'm going to do it. But there's this MBL system that I heard at CES. I forget the year, but the speaker is like a Radio Strawler, and it's $100,000.
360s.
And it's like $100,000 speaker and a $250,000 system. And it was playing on a reel-to-reel, and just the realism of that performance, I couldn't go into any other room and hear it. And it was just extremely odd. But what's even more odd is I listened to a larger version of the same speaker at a different show, and I didn't quite hear it because for whatever reason, the room wasn't the same, the acoustics weren't the same. So that left me a little bit puzzled why I couldn't hear what I had heard previously. But then it also spoils you when you hear $250,000 worth of sound system and go,
Yeah.
okay, probably not going to get that. So and then it kind of like, how can I get that for $2,000 or $3,000 or as close to that as you can? But that's the
Pretty close.
That's the goal. But I don't know. I think Emiko, you've heard those speakers or you're familiar with them?
Very familiar with them. Yeah. They're killer.
Actually, Emiko, you're next, so I want to hear your take on this.
Okay, well, I was gonna. I'm not gonna go with the speaker because Brian's right. The Radial Stronger 360s by MBL are just everybody go home after that. There's no point really. Like they're crazy. But I would and Brian, I know why it's a placement thing when you the tower version versus the waist high version.
Yep.
The waist high version is compacted differently.
Right.
So but for me, I have to say, I think in a non-speaker situation, the component that has really shot me through the heart repeatedly has been Jeff Rowland, the Damon integrated. I heard that paired with a bunch of different things. Stenheim, backing up CH Precision, backing up the avant-garde Unofinos, and just Jeff is like Santa Claus to me. He's like Santa Claus.
What kind of piece of equipment?
Not really Santa Claus.
What kind of piece of equipment is that?
Pardon?
What kind of piece of equipment is that?
It's an integrated amplifier.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
It's and the thing is that I have a couple friends of mine that have hi-fi showrooms, right? High-end audio showrooms. They would kill me if I said hi-fi. And it was interesting because I've heard all of the speakers paired with different components and different power. And every time they bring the Jeff Rowland in and hook it up, doesn't matter what pair of speakers it is, doesn't matter what your cables are, it doesn't matter, nothing matters. You put that front and center, it just changes the game completely. And it's just, and I love the fact that it's made by hand. It's made in the States. Jeff is a real person. Like he's a great guy. I don't endorse him, but I think it's wonderful that something so brilliant comes out of a singular person, right?
Yeah.
And that vision becomes real and reaches us in this way. And so that's my my very humble stamp of approval is Jeff Rowland.
That's a pretty solid choice. Jeff's been around for decades, making really great stuff.
He's a dope guy. Yeah.
Yes, he is. Lauren?
So I probably heard a tiny fraction of the number of components or systems that you guys have. So I will just say that probably the most awe-inspiring thing I have heard was listening to John Coltrane's Blue Train on the Macintosh reference system in Houston Audio here in Houston. That is probably the most incredible audio hi-fi experience I have ever had.
And quite an expensive one, to say the least. Yeah, having just come from the Macintosh factory, my only comment is ouch.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
So I went to a local collector's house, and he actually has an outbuilding filled with the most vintage hi-fi equipment I've ever seen in one place. So we looked over that, but then he invited me into his house to hear his daily driver. And his daily driver was Martin Logan speakers, a Macintosh preamp, and homemade tube amps with tubes the size of vintage Coke bottles. And he played Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Judy Garland, of course, and you could hear her lips separate before she took a breath in to sing. And I had never personally heard music at that level. I mean, it wasn't even to the point of the music yet, just hearing that experience. And I think that got me going on, not so much on trying to recreate something like that, because he put a lot of time and effort into it, but that got my interest in just that tube sound, that musical sound. It may not be the most accurate, but man, it was really a treat to hear.
Yeah. I would say for me, I guess people who are really diehard audiophiles would remember the brand Fi. Don Garber passed away a number of years ago. He was a really sweet man. Actually, he lived in Brooklyn. He designed everything in his home in Brooklyn. I was fortunate. There was a period in my life when I owned 3 of Don's amplifiers, actually, and one of his preamps. If you look in old copies of Listener magazine, or if you look online, the late Art Dudley was a huge fan of Don Garber. And Don, the industrial design of his amplifiers, it's well worth looking up on Google after the broadcast. Everything was sort of made either like in an X, or even, and the preamps were done in a Y. This is all sort of like looking at it from above. And they were all very, very sort of simple designs, but he used such high quality iron in his amplifiers. And I remember I bought his X3 300B amplifier. And I remember, I mean, even though it wasn't a very powerful amplifier, I don't think I was getting more than 6 or 7 watts out of it. I connected it to a pair of Spender SB23Es that I had in my apartment. And I remember I put on some Donald Byrd listening to Cristo Redentor. And I have never in my life heard a trumpet sound that real from any pair of speakers ever. And I've listened to a lot of horns with those type of amplifiers, but there was something about the warmth of the Spender and something about the majesty of Don Garber's circuit design and those 300B tubes. And I kind of just sort of didn't even want to like turn off. I think I actually fell asleep in my chair. I was so happy and kind of content with life at that moment, listening to that song. That it was just one of those moments that I kind of wish I had not sold that combo, because it was so much better than things I've heard even right now in 2021 from a lot of hi-fi brands. In our remaining 10 minutes or so, oh, Mitch, go ahead.
Really fast. So thinking about, now my head is moving on components and stuff. So there is a component that I think is wildly overlooked, that I believe, you know, almost all homes should have, especially when an audio system is involved, no matter where it is at on the spectrum. If you're enjoying it, you should have one of these. And something that really, really changed a lot for me was a voltage regulator. They are insane, and they are inexpensive, and they are industrial pieces of equipment. And what that component does is it essentially makes sure that whatever outlet the voltage regulator is plugged into, like my home is an old home, and so that's not in the power grid. We have old power where I live. But what the voltage regulator does is it makes sure that the output of the voltage regulator is making it so that every component or surge protector or line conditioner that is plugged into it is seeing a consistent, in the US, you know, is seeing a consistent 120 volts of power. And so the voltage regulator, it compensates for inaccuracies of the power that is coming into your home and then into your components. And like on my record lathe, for example, when and that's an old beast. But when the voltage regulator was introduced into the system, it made the transcription platter, the 16-inch platter, spin at a much more consistent 33 1/3 for a longer period of time. And that the reason it wouldn't do that, old home, old equipment, then when the power wasn't clean and there were dips or there were spikes in the power, depending on what your neighbors are doing, it would actually change the output or quality of my components. And so a voltage regulator, so that your equipment is seeing the voltage it needs to see for how it was designed, that was pretty mind-blowing. So shout out voltage regulator design and engineers everywhere. You are beautiful people.
Is that your Christmas list suggestion then?
Yes. All audiophiles get a voltage regulator. Yes.
Yeah.
It would be, but don't hang it. Don't put it in a stocking. Like you're gonna hurt someone.
Yes, because it'll burn your house.
That would be a really bad move in a stocking.
That would be bad. Yes. Okay, so really quickly, everyone's going to get to do this. I had suggested before, because we are coming up to the holidays. Black Friday is in a couple of weeks. We have 13 buying guides on the site this week for our readers. 13 different buying guides. Black Friday's coming up. Hanukkah is really early this year. And so I'm very excited for Hanukkah, even though it's like in 3 weeks and I have to buy all my kids now like 24 presents. I'm not so happy about that. But really quickly, I suggested to the group that we recommend some non-component related gifts for all the audiophiles in your life. And I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to go fast. This is a slightly older book, and I hope Lauren knows it. Robert Crumb's this is just, if you don't know Robert Crumb, if you've never seen the movie American Splendor, he was sort of Harvey Picar's sort of closest friend in American Splendor. He was a marvelous illustrator, one of the best cartoonists really in American pop culture history. He was a huge music historian and aficionado. And Robert Crumb's Heroes of Blues, Jazz, and Country. This is a slightly older book. There is a CD that comes with this. The music is phenomenal, and all of the illustrations in the book are actually by Bob Crumb. If you loved Eric, you would love this book if you don't have it. It's incredible. Secondly, this is yet to be released. I have one of the early galleys from the publisher, from Simon & Schuster. Thank you, my friends at Simon & Schuster. If you're a fan of Hollywood and you love the silent film era and how it evolved from silent film into the talkies, this is a brand new book that's coming out in January about the life of Buster Keaton. So I know Emeka would probably love this. I just got this a few days ago. I'm about halfway through. Absolutely fantastic book about Buster Keaton. Third and final book, if you're a jazz fan, this wonderful biography of Thelonious Monk. If you do not own it, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is one of the best books written about any jazz musician ever. So Eric, I hope you have this book. I might buy it for you. I'm buying this for Christmas then. This is a phenomenal book about Thelonious Monk. Absolutely riveting. Everything that you didn't know about Thelonious Monk, and believe me, there's a lot. This is a well written book, and really, if you're a jazz fan, you need to own this. And then just quickly, I know a lot of us at Acoustics are fans of a company based in New Jersey called Analog Restorations. We have a feature about analog restoration that's actually up on the site that you can read. Analog Restorations does custom cork platter mats, and he also makes record wipes. I know a bunch of us actually use his platter mats on our turntables. So he did two really totally cool ones for me. One is a Han Solo one, which when I saw it, I went berserk. It's going on my Thorns 125. And then also he did a remote zombie one for me, which I thought was really, really cool, with Rick Deckard from Blade Runner. So if you're looking for a really cool sort of gift this holiday season for Hanukkah, Festivus, or Christmas for the audiophile in your life, Analog Restorations is on the internet. He makes amazing custom stuff. Mitch.
So I would say
Voltage regulator.
Voltage regulator. Don't put it in a stocking. That again.
Don't give it to your kids.
Don't buy a used one, for the love of all. Like, if you're gonna buy a voltage regulator, don't find it on Craigslist. Buy your own. And but I would say for the music lover in your life, hard to go wrong if they're a vinyl listener. It doesn't matter which one, but anything from the Blue Note Tone Poet series. That is a absolutely phenomenal introduction into what it means to have high quality vinyl in 2021, 2022, and what the current industry is capable of when it comes to the medium and the music. Obviously, there's soon to be another one, but there's a lot of information on Blue Note Tone Poets on the Acoustics website. And then the other thing that I would recommend for a music lover in your life is to gift them something from Bandcamp Friday and ask them how they are maybe feeling that month, or think about an instance with that person, and just do a little bit of digging. And Bandcamp Fridays, when those happen, all of the proceeds, or all the purchases, that happen on Bandcamp Friday, all the profits go directly to the bands themselves on that day. And so supporting local music and also gifting independent music to loved ones is that's a pretty tough gift to beat. So there are my choices.
Absolutely. Eric.
So I have a couple. So for the jazz fan, If you've ever been on Instagram and gone to the Jazz Kisa Instagram handle, they do these really cool magazines where they feature either one or several jazz coffee shops. Amazing pictures, and they have English versions, so you can get the write-ups in English and you can actually understand what they say. I've bought both Japanese and English versions. My wife looks at the Japanese ones, I look at the English ones. But they're fantastic, and they have a new one coming out. I have mine on the way, and there's just been a second pressing of it. Fantastic. And then the other thing that I would suggest is this book here from a publisher called Phaidon. It's called Hi-Fi. This book was kind of the holy grail for hi-fi books for a really long time, and it was out of print, and the prices were sky high. I was looking and looking and looking. And earlier this year, it got republished. And so it's available for about $100. It's a hardcover book. It's several hundred pages, pictures of hi-fi equipment from the earliest days up until the modern. And there's some cool stuff there. And what I really like about it is that a few of the pieces that I have in the background here are in that book. And that makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside.
Nice. Brian?
Yeah, I'd like to recommend one of our podcast guest book, Dr. Mark Waldrop, who we had on the podcast a few months back. And his nearly 900-page book is Music and Audio, a user guide to better sound. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the hi-fi, digital music, you name it, audio production space. So if you want to get a very in-depth deep dive into music, look up Dr. Mark Waldrop and his book, and tons of knowledge there. So,
Emiko?
Okay, I'll make it.
Buy
quick.
my album.
No, I don't have an album. That's for spring. That's for Easter.
Buy my movie.
No, you can buy tickets to the movie, but no. So I've got a couple things. The first thing is sort of piggybacking on what Mitch said. This is going to be the second video of the new Acoustics video series, as a matter of fact. Supporting independent artists, getting out there, not just buying the music, but a lot of them / us have stuff, merch, swag, whatever you want to call it. So a t-shirt, a poster, whatever they have, little things here and there. But that's a cool thing to do, because there you go. Because you end up, okay, Lauren didn't like that. Lauren went away. She's like, no, we're not doing that.
She ran to get her stocking.
Okay. So like, and a lot of the hi-fi folks have their own stuff. I'm pointing at Mitch, except I don't know if my window is matching the broadcast, but where you see him. But anyway, I'm pointing at Mitch. So if you know somebody who is in hi-fi, who is an ambassador, who's an evangelist, who's an influencer, whatever, and they've got stuff, that's a great thing to do. Also, because you can literally show that you love hi-fi to other people, right? And when you make it approachable, then it becomes more inclusive. So that's the first thing. The second thing is like, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but hi-fi for me comes with some sort of libation and also coffee. So anything that is beverage based is most welcome, because I think a lot of us like to sip something, listen to our favorite tunes, whatever. So, and slow pan camera 2 coming in. So
then a voltage regulator falls from the ceiling and ruins it all.
Somebody's gonna have to like make some sort of like iron stocking or something. Yeah. I think. But I think these are things. And the third thing, I'm just gonna shameless plug, but I'm gonna say it, and if you don't like it, you can edit it out later. Is y'all know that I work with the show, and we have something called the group. And so one of the things that we're putting out starting right before Thanksgiving is hi-fi experiences. So very curated hi-fi experiences, virtual and in real life, all over the country, all over North America, including Canada. So I would encourage, you can't buy it yet, but I would encourage you to sort of keep your eyes and ears open for that. Because if you want to buy somebody a gift that's not a component, that's affordable, a hi-fi experience is something that might be really cool, that you can share together, right? As spouses, right, or family or friends or whatever. So those are my little tips. self-serving,
cool.
yes.
And actually,
but
I think you should do an article about the number 2 one. Just a hint.
I forgot what number 2 was already. Somebody quick.
The hi-fi experience, for God's sake.
Oh, yes. Okay, well, we can talk about that later. Anyway,
Okay.
those are my 2 cents.
Lauren.
Okay, so I brought a book also. It's by Bob Boylan, who you will know as the creator of the Tiny Desk concert series for NPR and the host of All Songs Considered. So this book's a few years old, but it's called Your Song Changed My Life. And he interviews a bunch of different artists. I mean, it's everyone from Smokey Robinson to Dave Grohl, Justin Vernon, Jackson Brown. I mean, artists across all genres, and talks to them about mostly what was the song or the specific artist or album that changed their life. And this is one of my favorite books to recommend to people because there's really something for everyone in here. And I also highly recommend listening to the song that changed the artist's life, and then music from the artist as you're listening, and kind of hearing that relation and that influence in the music is really fun. And then our discussion on merch made me think of something I just got in, and this is a shout out to Jen and Robin and Mitch, Women in Vinyl. I just got in one of their awesome new shirts that has all the steps of the vinyl manufacturing process on it that I just love, and I think is a fun gift for anyone and a great way to support their mission as well.
Does that one have
Women in Vinyl?
At the very, very end of does it have converting to MP3 on it?
That's on the back at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's underwear that's not listed.
Jeremy?
I'm going to go the speed round here. So I do fully support the merch purchases. That's absolutely awesome. Bandcamp, to Mitch's point, the old house equals a voltage regulator. For anyone who likes vintage gear, get them a Tech Hi-Fi or an Allied radio catalog from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. They're very entertaining catalogs. And music-wise, get the entire Lucius catalog. All
solid picks. All right, so we have covered a lot of ground tonight, and actually, Mitch and we stuck to an hour, which is pretty amazing for us. So I want to thank everyone tonight who joined us from one side of North America to the other. Mitch Anderson in Michigan, Eric Pye in Calgary, Alberta, Brian in Santa Ana, California, Emiko, who I think is in Vegas.
Till tomorrow morning.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Lauren, who was in Houston, and Jeremy, who was in Buffalo, New York, home of the Buffalo Sabres and Buffalo Bills. And I'm not going to make any more jokes now that Jack Eichel's gone. And I am your host, Ian White, Acoustics Editor-in-Chief. I'm live tonight from Asbury Park, New Jersey, where Bruce met Clarence for the first time. I'll just leave that there. You've been listening to the Acoustics Podcast live on YouTube. Please, if you didn't see the entire video cast tonight, you can catch it actually on our website. I think it'll be up sometime tomorrow. Also, you'll be able to catch last week's episodes of Crossroads Radio, which is Lauren's new podcast. You'll also be able to catch Blue Circle Radio, last week's podcast, but we'll have this week's up as well, Mitch. So we'll have a double dosage of BCR this week. And Mitch, just to let you know, the Red Wings beat Vegas tonight. So sorry, Emiko.
I'm a Red Wings fan.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have been since 95.
Okay, so we actually have normal hockey fans here as I sit here in my Washington Capitals hoodie. You've been watching the Acoustics Podcast live on YouTube. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you very, very soon.
For now.
Thanks, everybody.